really did choose one of the whitest guys at HBS to kick off this Black History Month event. We'll see how that goes. So to be honest, I'm actually pretty nervous about this. That I really am a poster child for white privilege, and here to talk to you about Black history and racial inequality. And I'm also nervous because this is really important. That 2019 is the 400th anniversary of American slavery. And when we hit a big anniversary like this one, I think we have an extra responsibility to really reflect on our history and reckon with our history and ask ourselves how much progress have we really made and kind of how far do we have to go. And I think a lot of what this is going to be about today is that we've made some progress, but we really haven't made as much progress as a lot of people believe. So my white privilege story, so I grew up in Orange County, California. If you know Orange County, it's one of the whitest places there is, affluent suburb. When I grew up in a very safe neighborhood, went to great public schools. When I went to college at Stanford, I actually wasn't a great student. I skipped a whole bunch of classes. I got mediocre grades, but no one ever doubted my intelligence. No one ever doubted that I was hardworking. If anything, they saw it as a plus, that they thought, like, wow, here's someone who has entrepreneurial potential because they're willing to bend the rules. And when I decided to start a nonprofit organization, I raised money. The philanthropic world is almost entirely white donors. Foundations are run almost entirely by white people. So the organization I started ran is a nonprofit called College Spring, which helps low-income students of color prepare for the SATs in college, direct service programs in high school. During my 7 years as CEO, we raised $15 million. 90% of that funding came from white people. So the organization I started literally could not have existed without the connections I built at Stanford with white philanthropy. And then when I was applying to grad school at the Kennedy School and the Business School, at both places, white alumni, powerful white alumni and faculty who were affiliated with each institution put in a good word on my behalf. And so when I think about my life, yes, I most of the time did work hard, but every step of the way, being white has given me additional advantages. And it's really been one advantage built on top of another advantage built on top of another advantage. And the way I've come to think of those advantages is the return on white privilege, which is the idea that white privilege is not just a head start, it's not just being born on third base. It's actually benefits that compound across your entire lifetime, they compound across generations. And I really do believe that when we look at the racial disparities we have in the United States, that they can be fully explained by those compound effects of white privilege combined with anti-black racism in the US. And I'm ashamed to admit that I think it took me longer than it should have to come fully to that conclusion. And what I wanted to share with you was kind of my story and sort of how I evolved to the point that I'm now at and the perspective I now have. And it really all starts a few years ago when I was going to a fundraising meeting with a billionaire in San Francisco. And so I called an Uber, hopped in the car, and my driver was a young man, and he asked me what I did for a living, and I told him that I ran this nonprofit, College Spring, that runs direct service programs in high schools, and he got really excited. I think part of why he was excited is that he was happy that I was just not another tech person. But I think he also really connected with the mission of the organization. And he started telling me that when he was in high school, he got a scholarship to San Jose State. That he said he still remembers the day that he got the scholarship to San Jose State, and he rushed home rushed home to tell his mom about the scholarship. And when he came home, he found his mom in tears, single mom. And he asked her, like, Mom, like, why are you crying? Why are you crying? And she says, like, honey, I have breast cancer, and we don't have health insurance. And so he tells me that he drops out of school to help pay for her treatments. So he started working 3 jobs. He was a baggage handler at the San Francisco airport, construction worker. He worked at an ice cream shop, 100 hours a week, these 3 jobs. I still think to this day that he may be the hardest working person I've ever met in my entire life. And then sort of out of nowhere, the car ride was over. And I had to go into this fundraising meeting that we were in downtown San Francisco by now, so like outside this big skyscraper. Kind of jarring shift, but like had to go do my job. And so, take the elevator up 30-some stories, get greeted at the front desk, get walked over to the corner office where this billionaire sits, and like this is a crazy office. Like this is like panoramic windows. You have the Golden Gate Bridge on one side, you have the Bay Bridge on the other side, like the entire view of the San Francisco Bay in between. And this was a big meeting for the organization I was running. This was our 3rd or 4th meeting. This was the like ask for $1 million type meeting, and honestly, like I don't think I had ever been more motivated to raise money after getting out of that car ride than just like feeling how unfair our world is. That I think it was more driven than ever to raise that money and do whatever I could to help level the playing field. And so we're talking, and the meeting's going really well. We're about a half hour in, and out of the blue, he asked me randomly, he's like, wait, so this program you run in the schools, like you serve the entire junior class at the schools? And I was puzzled by the question because most people are excited about that feature of the program, that it's not a cherry picking program, it's made available to the whole class. But you know what he said to me? He said, well, the problem is most of those kids are lazy, and I don't want my money going down the drain on those lazy kids. He said, like I do some scholarship programs for high achievers, but I don't want my money going down the drain on those lazy kids. And I was sitting there and I was just shocked and crestfallen and like thinking about the young man who I just met working 100 hours a week. And then here's this guy sitting in his corner office. I think we literally talked about like private jets was like the small talk. And he's telling me that these people from a community that he doesn't know, that they're lazy and that they don't deserve to have a better life. And there were a lot of things that bothered me about that interaction. But I think what bothered me the most was I just couldn't get over, like, how is it the case that like some wealthy person gets to decide who has a better life and who doesn't? Like, why is that up to one person? Like, just because they happen to make a lot of money in one field, that they get to make those decisions. And I think what it took me too long to realize was that the billionaire and I have a lot more in common than I would have been comfortable admitting at the time. And so I'll tell you an anecdote about that. So a little while later, we were at College Springs all-staff retreat. At the time, we were about 25 full-time employees. So we were all in a conference room together at our retreat, and we were doing a full-day diversity, inclusion, and equity workshop. It was the first time we had brought in consultants to do a full-day workshop with our entire organization. And to be honest, I had thought that it was going to go well. That our staff was 80% women, our staff was majority people of color. I thought of myself as reasonably conscious on these kind of topics. But the reality was that the meeting didn't go well. That our team shared a lot of frustrations that they hadn't felt comfortable sharing with me publicly until we were in that setting. The biggest critique was the fact that even though our organization was majority people of color, that our management team and board were almost exclusively white. And what that meant was that when it came down to who had power in the organization, who made the key decisions in the organization, who had control over the organization, it really was white people. And that caused me to really start to look around and realize that that it wasn't just our organization, that most nonprofit organizations are similar to this. Most foundations are similar to this. Everyone here knows the statistics about business. Politics is no different. And if you add it all up, what you really get to is that white people have pretty much a near monopoly on power in the United States. And when people hear this, some people might say, like, well, like is that really so bad? Like, maybe, like, they're nice, good people doing their best, that, they're making things fair for everybody. But the data doesn't support that at all. That if you look at where we are today, the richest 50 white Americans, 50 people, have more wealth than all 43 million African Americans combined. Median black wealth fell from the 80s to a few years ago from 7,000 to 2,000. In Boston, median black wealth is $8. People were so shocked by this figure that, so the Boston Globe reported, people were so shocked by the figure that, like, a whole bunch of people told them about the typo in their paper. They had to send out another article to say that it was true. And there's actually some studies that project that median black wealth in the United States will be zero out nationwide before the end of this century. And so when we think about how much progress we've made in the US, one of the ways to look at it is that if we get to that point where median black wealth is zero, the typical black American will have no more money in the bank than those who arrived on slave ships 400 years ago. And I know that might sound depressing and hopeless, but the upshot of all of this is that for centuries, black people have been telling white people everything they need to know about how to solve racial inequality. That you could go back to Frederick Douglass and Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X and so many, many other people. So many people have been telling white people what the issues are, what they're experiencing, how we can make things better. And the fundamental barrier is just that white people don't listen. And when I think about my experience at our all-staff retreat, getting that feedback from our staff members of color about how our organization worked, it sucked. It didn't feel good to get that feedback, that I was realizing in real time that I was more ignorant than I thought I was, that in certain ways I wasn't as good of a person as I thought I was. And in that moment I didn't really know what to do, that I just wanted to shrink in my chair and disappear. I was the CEO of the organization, so I couldn't really do that. And at the time, all I could really muster to say was that I was sorry and we would do better. Now the organization did a lot of work since then, internally, externally. I'm very proud of the fact that my successor is a woman of color who's leading the organization now. But I think fundamentally, for white folks in the room, I think there's a lot of cases where we get feedback from people of color and we have a decision about what we do in that moment. That, do we feel shame? Do we feel defensive? Do we argue? And all I would really say is that we need to listen. And when I say listen, I mean it in the broadest sense. That this is an issue we have at HBS, that we have very few black students in each of our sections who carry an immense burden to share that experience with the rest of the section. So it's listening to our classmates, but it's also listening to the wider world. That there's a lot of professors at Harvard, there's a lot of people in the community, a lot of people in communities all over who have expertise and knowledge in this issue and are presenting answers that frankly just are not given the attention they deserve. So if I can leave you with one message, really is just to listen and eventually take action. Thank you so much.